Welcome back to Our Justice Journey with Dr. Lawrence Winn, Part 2, and we thank you for your continued interest in this discussion. Mhm.
And I look back, and that's why my sons are taking Spanish and French, and they want to take Japanese, and so whatever they want to do, it's just like, let's get it. But when I look, I should know Spanish by now, and it
Yeah.
was like, well, I didn't see a need at the moment,
Mhm.
because I was so determined to, you know, my path. So my part of my path has been international, and I wish I would have learned Spanish as well.
Yeah, yeah. So our next question is, coming up, you had a mentor, Kevin Johnson, which was
hmm
a former basketball player and mayor of Sacramento. How did having
hmm
a mentor impact you and your academic and career trajectory?
Yeah, someone to always be real and to hold you accountable. Uh, for example, I mentioned basketball. I wasn't that good in basketball. I love basketball just like any person growing up. It was just exciting to play. You get a thrill, and plus, a lot of the people you saw look like me. Uh, and I was good enough to play varsity and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
But it was Kevin Johnson who told me, if you look at it, how many people actually make it to the NBA out of Phoenix or out of Sacramento? If there's 10 out of 10 million at play, do you
Yeah,
think you're going to be one of the 10 out of 10 million? And that was easy for me to know and then to figure out. And so for him just to be real and honest and say, like, it's not a pipe dream, but it is a pipe dream, right? You
Mhm.
take it how you want to take it. Uh, so being real, also holding me accountable. If I ever had an excuse for something, it was like, let's just move on. Life is going to get better. Just keep working hard. The last thing is opportunities.
Yeah.
One of the things Kevin provided for me was opportunities. A lot of exposure. What was it like to work in a media room, right? What was it like to be an attorney? What was it like to be a real estate investor? All these things that I didn't have access to. I went to a really good high school. A lot of my classmates had access to these opportunities, but the people who were gatekeepers weren't black. They were white, and
Mhm.
so you had to know somebody. You had to have social capital. So he was the person who connected me to these opportunities. And so at a young age in high school, I was introduced to a whole lot of different careers. And so that's why I'm really big in social capital, connecting people, making sure people are connected, and just exploring different opportunities. Because once you learn about the opportunities out there, it's just amazing. For example, I wanted to be a doctor, and so I worked for a year with an orthopedic surgeon. And
Mhm.
once I saw all that blood start to splatter, and the surgeon standing on his feet for like 8 hours, and I was like, this is not cool. We don't even talk.
Mhm.
Uh, and so after that summer, it was like, nah, I'm cool on being a doctor, orthopedic surgeon. So uh, he exposed me to a lot of different opportunities and access. So having a mentor is important. But I want to just say this about a mentor: it's two-way street, right? The mentor can provide support, but it's up to the mentee to also be held accountable, right? So
Mhm.
what are you doing? What are you learning? How can you show appreciation to your mentor? And so if you're a mentee, have an agenda, things you want to talk to your mentor about, things you want to get out of this relationship, and also deliver on the things that you say you're going to do.
Yeah, definitely. And to that point of like social capital, I just think it's so evident, there's a lot of opportunities that I feel like we do not know about, especially as just like kids and with college, you could go to college for free. You know what I mean? That's
hmm
like just being having like social capital and like meeting a lot of people really opens these doors and like I think about people I know, like thinking about Saudi, the MET program that he got into, with business
hmm
and engineering, it's like this,
hmm
because he met people and, it was just, really open doors for him. So it's just like, yeah, I emphasize that idea of just very social capital and connecting with people.
Yeah, it's so important. And more, when I lived in Newark, New Jersey, the guys that I work with in Newark, they never left their corner. They never left their little block. So that was like a 2 mile radius. New York City was only 15 minutes by train. New
Mhm.
York City is a vibrant, that's like the city everybody wants to go to throughout the world. They live
Yeah.
15 minutes away from New York City. And so the first time I took them to New York City, they were bugging out. It's like, wow, this is New York City. And I'm like, yo, this is 15 minutes by train. How long did it take us? They were like no longer than 20 minutes. And so for them, they were not even being connected to people, but been able to see other things. And so they went to New York City, and a couple of guys started to hang out in New York City and started to explore and got connected with people, and it just changed their world from Newark to New York City. And
Mhm.
it's important not only the connecting of people, but also the opportunities that it will lead to seeing different parts of the world, even your own city or your own region.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Our next question is, how do you define transformative justice and why is it important?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a lot of different types of justice, right? Economic, social, political, you go down the list. And to me, transformative justice gets to the root causes of the harms of what's going on in society. So it's the inherent wrongdoing, such as, economic, political, and, social.
Mhm.
So transformative justice, in order for you to change everything else, you have to dig deep inside and see what's going on. So, for example, if we're talking about educational justice, transformative justice is saying, let's go to the very root. Let's look at the
Mm.
history of the inequities in education and see how everything is connected, because it's just not education justice, it's other types of injustices that have caused the education system to fail. So transformative justice bring all the different parts, silo justices together. And so it's saying, let's get to the inherent causes, and those inherent causes may not be one, it's several. And why is it important? It's the DNA check.
Mm.
A lot of times you may think you have the solution, and we see this a lot in education. Every 5 years, somebody comes up with this brilliant idea, or a nice book. But what happens is that it glazes over, or it may be a band-aid to the situation. But transformative justice gets down to the roots, and when you're in the roots, it's really ugly, and it takes
Mhm.
some time to really change. And so transformative justice is it's not going to it doesn't change things overnight, because it takes a while. So that's why it's so important. It requires us to stay there for a while, and continue to do the work.
Yeah, you gotta get to the dirt, like your whole analogy with the tree, it's like you gotta get to the
Yes,
dirt.
got to get to the door. It's the root. And that root, you got it going. It's going in different directions and depths. And so once you start getting to that, that's when you can start seeing some serious change.
Yeah, that's deep. Our next question is, what impact can scholars have on the larger society?
Scholarship is important. Researching is very important. Understanding the issue, the problem, being able to write about it, being able to disseminate, that's so important. But when there's a gap between research and practice, research and reality, what I mean by reality is what's out there, right? The scholar has to be able to, it's like a rapper, right?
Mhm.
The rapper is in the writing the lyrics. If it's Nas, if it's Scarface, uh, Rakim, Kendrick Lamar, if it's Lauryn Hill, whoever the rapper is telling that story. That
Yeah.
story has to be told in a way that people will understand the problem and the solutions,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
They have to deliver their findings, which is part of the research, in such a way that people could understand the message. So when I think about hip hop, I think about um, Outkast being able to tell a story, what it means to live in the dirty South, right? Or even when you go back to the message, when you know they were talking about crack cocaine in the Bronx and what was going on, that was so compelling. And so scholarship is important too, because it's like music. You have to be able to write in such a way or lecture in such a way that you're telling what is going on, and also sharing some of the possible solutions. So the influence of scholarship can help us improve our quality of life,
Mhm.
because scholars are trained, scholars are well read, scholars have to be responsible and accountable. But it's also up to the scholars to be activists, even if some folks don't like using the word activist, scholar activist. It's up to them to advocate because scholarship is not neutral. As
Mm.
much as people want scholarship research to be neutral, it's not neutral. And so scholarship plays an important role in how we can change the society. And that's why it's important to have diversity in scholarship, diversity in the people who are scholars and doing this research.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree, and your whole idea, we got to put our what we preach into practice. Like if we think about schools, if we're just looking at all the disparities and we're not doing anything to, practice and change it, what's
Mhm.
really going to come of it and what's the purpose? So, yeah, I really like that analogy.
And you start seeing like newer scholars been able to relate and write in such a way that you know my grandma or uh, uh, somebody in high school will pick up the book and say, "Oh, you know, I understand this." Instead of us using big words, ethnography, and you know, uh, you can go down a list. Those words are important, but
Hmm.
if those words aren't translated in a way that people can say, "Oh, you know what? This is what this is all about." It's a way to increase critical consciousness. And if your scholarship isn't increasing critical, I don't know its value.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Our next question is, what made you pursue multiple disciplines and how has that affected you as a scholar activist?
Well, multiple disciplines. Uh, Kanye West, the old Kanye, not the new Kanye.
Mhm.
He had that interlude when he was talking about uh, the one person who had all these degrees and he had these diplomas, and he used that in a way to stay warm. And Kanye was like, "Why do you have all those degrees and I'm out here and I'm successful, but you got all those degrees?" And I remember Kanye came up with that interlude, and I was like, man. So all my people, my boys, everybody was laughing at me because I was still in graduate school, and I was in graduate school forever. From after Berkeley, I went to law school, and then I went to got my master's in divinity from Princeton, and then I got my PhD. And all at the same time, I was working. I was involved in the
Mhm.
community, whatever community I was in. Uh, but all those disciplines were important to me, and gave me the training I needed to be able to solve issues and problems, and to strategize and to think critically. For example, being an English major, it just opened me up to this different world to think about um, in a creative way, creative writing, right, in English, to be able to think about the possibilities and to reimagine and to dream, right? So when you're reading a novel, you're way out, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes when you look at the problems, they can be depressing, and oppression can really get to folks, right? Like, damn, nothing has changed in all these years. It helped me be a better writer.
Hmm.
And then law school gave me the tools to be able to critique the system, to learn the system, to understand the law, and to understand what we call street law. People have to know their rights, and so I knew one day that I wanted to advocate for folks, especially in education. And then divinity's master's in divinity. Been African American, it's important to be connected to the Black church. Today it's MLK. King was a minister. So whatever community I go to, there's a language that I can speak, and people open their doors up, like Ebenezer Baptist Church, where King was a pastor.
Hmm.
Actually was a minister there for 3 years, and so Reverend Warnock, who's now a senator, I actually worked for him, and so it connected me to a historical foundation for Black America. And then lastly, education. That discipline just gave me the tools and research methods that I needed to be able to conduct research. Uh, I didn't know how all this was going to play out at the time. It was like a puzzle. You putting the pieces
Hmm.
together, you can see the picture, but when you're putting the puzzle together, it's just like, what is this? And then when you start putting the final pieces at the end or in the middle, however you go about your puzzle, it makes sense. And
Yeah.
so those disciplines gave me the training, the foundation, the ability to think critically, the ability to write, and also the ability to communicate. If it's talking to a certain audience, you
Mhm.
know, being able to have the ability to preach in a Black church, I can. It's important for me to be able to articulate, being
Mhm.
able to write. Right, if I'm doing some research, I want to be able to write and get my point across. But knowing my audience, if I'm speaking to a group of scholars, or if I'm speaking to high school students, or if I'm speaking to some cats on the corner, got to be able to translate. 'Cause some people call it code switching, but
Mhm.
so that's why the different disciplines for me have allowed me to be in multiple spaces and have a little street cred, scholarship cred, church cred, whatever kind of cred. I try to
Mhm.
see, what's in my pocket at that time.
Yes. Throughout getting like, my question is, throughout getting those disciplines, like, did you know that you wanted to do something centered around social justice, or did you just kinda, like, find your way to it?
So social justice is my moral compass. It
Mhm.
was always what I was about because of my background. And so, regardless of what I was going to do, even if I decided to be an engineer or even a doctor, I was going to be, say, make the most money, but I was going to open up, establish a foundation to help out.
Mhm.
So it was more about, helping people out because I get that from my mom. I've saw her from day one. If it was, waking us up on the weekends to pick up trash, or if it was to, do a car wash for the local uh, homeless shelter, whatever that was, it was always about helping people out and fighting for the improvement of, others as well as my own life and the injustices that take place. So all those disciplines, it was always connected to social justice. For example, I went to law school to
Mhm.
be an attorney for a nonprofit, right?
Mhm. We thank you for listening to part 2 of Our Justice Journey with Dr. Lawrence Winn. To further listen to this discussion, feel free to visit part 3.